Hi again, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the Fantasy Animation Podcast with me, Chris Holliday.
And me, Alex Sargent.
We are doing our first, I think, foray, well, not our first foray, but certainly one of our rare forays into television animation, and definitely our first foray into the Cartoon Network, I think.
Yeah, the Cartoon Network?
Cartoon Network, without the definite answer.
We'll find out in a minute.
We will. Yeah. We are looking at Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which... stresses me out for a couple of reasons, because there's no colon between Space Ghost and Coast to Coast. That's my first alarm bell ringing. But also...
I think people that worry about colons, this show might not...
be for them.
Yeah.
It's like you don't know me at all. Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which is a American live action / animated adult. I think we could probably put that in the camp of adult animation. We could also put it in the camp of surrealist animation as well. So this is a show that begins, it begins in the 1990s, first broadcast in 1994, but it sort of has a lineage further back, and we will talk a bit about that. I've got a few things. I think when we do these podcasts on television animation, we ask our special guest, who we haven't yet introduced, but we will, to give us some example episodes. So I think from my notes on the episodes that we've got, I think there's lots of stuff on here, kind of deconstructive animation and like reflexivity, of course, limited animation, and stardom as well. So the common sort of the way that this works is a sort of faux commentary, or a commentary on chat shows. Stuff on stardom, deconstructive animation, meta commentary, and probably a bit on the style of it as well. But what about you?
Yeah, some lovely fantasy keywords.
You watched this, didn't you?
I watched it when I was a kid.
Yes.
Yeah. I did watch it. It was the thing, I think, again, we're preempting our guest, but I think it was the thing that closed the network down, like at the end of each day, so it would be the last thing on. Then I think it would be like TNT movies, and because I was like this when I was 8, I would used to watch this, and then I'd watch like whatever Western was on at like 7 p.m. But yes, I do remember it well. I remember it fondly. It was nice to revisit it, and I think in terms of fantasy, there's lots of things to say about in terms of, I don't know, fantasy's relationship to subversion, carnival, fantasy as a method of critique, of an element of play, So we're going to have some fun.
There's some things to say. It won't just be us saying them. We are delighted to be joined by Jacqueline Ristola, who has kindly given us some direction on how to tackle this beast. So Jacqueline is a lecturer in the Department of Film and Television at the University of Bristol and the co-chair for SCMS's Animated Media SIG. She received her PhD in Film and Moving Image Studies from Concordia in Montreal, and her research areas include animation and anime studies, media industry studies, and queer representation. Alongside publishing in these areas, including a piece on today's case study. Her current book project examines how animation evinces the effects of media conglomeration from cable to streaming television. So Jacqueline, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're really thrilled to kind of have you, and I think we are delighted that you will be able to hold our hand. Hold my hand, and sort of while Alex Band is about ahead.
I'll be your mantis to your Space Ghost.
Right, thank you. And those kinds of references, I think, will be replete throughout this episode. So I guess as a starter for the episode, where does Space Ghost fit within your research? Is it kind of, presumably, did you watch it growing up? Did you return to it recently? Where does it kind of sit with all of your research interest, your work on media industries, obviously streaming animation? What is it about Space Ghost?
Yeah, I did definitely watch it growing up because Cartoon Network was like my favorite channel.
Okay.
That was like the number one, always watch Cartoon Network. Although like I was still young, so I wasn't necessarily like awake that late, because it'd run sort of in the later like evening. In terms of my research monograph, it's really the first case study where I'm looking at how media conglomeration actually shapes production, and in particular animation production. So like the show is able to exist because Ted Turner buys the Hanna-Barbera archive, for example, and it's like this very literal reuse of the archive. I look at sort of other examples of how, and I use sort of Cartoon Network as like the case study to kind of track this kind of movement where once this conglomerate has the archive, they want to mine its IP, or like sometimes like in this case, the literal materials for reuse, and as a kind of it helps preserve their IP and the value of the IP if it keeps being, used and reused. I think there's what I kind of call it is like the logic of loops. Like, well, we're going to reuse and reuse materials, and that there's that, and especially animation because of its particular materiality, like the way it's actually made. Like it really is especially like pliable in that way to just be. In the case of like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, literally like rotoing out these images from the original series, reanimate them through editing, and this is how they make this quote unquote air quotes. I'm doing air quotes. Original show, right? Which is in fact, not original in the sense that it's actually drawing from an archive. It's literally reusing something that aired in the 60s, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so this is because this is what I was trying to get my head around. I went into this cold, and I mean freezing. So Space Ghost was a superhero character, a character created in the 60s for CBS by Hanna-Barbera. So this is the origins of this particular character.
Yeah, it's like Space Ghost and Dino Boy was the show. Okay.
Right, okay. Created by Alex Toth. And then the idea is that 30 years later, or 20, 30 years later, there is a sort of, because you've written on the program with regards to kind of remix culture. So it's not just a spin-off. It's not a continuation of the series in the same way. Or is it? Does it function like a continuation, or is it literally taking a group of cartoons and cutting them up and making something brand new without a colon in the title?
It's basically that, like just taking it, as if it, as if it was kind of paper, but instead it's all like digital. And like one of the key things was that because like this was only really enabled because of digital like editing software and digital technologies. Like I think there was like a quote from either Mike Lazzo or someone else who like worked on the show, which was like digital technologies was the only way this could have been made possible, that they had this ability to like, kind of chop and screw. Yeah. Literally like this older show. But like, no, it's not like, it's a sequel.
Okay. Because so I was really interested. So is it the extent of this cutting up? Are we talking sort of beyond all recognition, or is it sort of almost taking some of the cells, the images, and just putting them in new situations because I'm trying to, because some of the style of it looks like it perhaps wasn't drawn and created for that particular scene, but maybe it was. I don't know. It's a really curious program, I think, in lots of ways.
Yeah, it's super hybrid because like I think the set was the physical. There is like this kind of physical set, and you see that being like deconstructed in one of the episodes. Yeah. They rotoed out all the figures and then would reanimate them. There was a little bit of like original animation commissioned, like Space Ghost tapping cue cards. But like if you watch the show throughout, it's they have a couple pieces of new animation. Yeah. And then they just reuse that throughout. Like so once they have their literally like their stock cycles of movement, they'll just use it however they can, including like stock cycles that will be reused for different, like they're meant to represent different things, but through audio, through like voice acting, they're made to be differentiated, essentially.
Just because I'm the Luddite on this show, so can we break this down just even more simply, because I think I'm getting a bit hazy on how this is made, and perhaps some listeners therefore are. So when you say that so Ted Turner buys the archive of Hanna-Barbera, so in my head an archive means sort of all the previous episodes, but I'm assuming you're also talking about all the production materials surrounding these episodes.
Yeah, it might be more accurate to say they just buy Hanna-Barbera, period. Right. So that does include like the production studio. They also get Ruby Spears, like everything, who like worked at Hanna-Barbera and then went out on their own. Okay. So it's mainly like the main thing why Ted Turner wanted Hanna-Barbera was because there's just all of this cartoon programming. Yeah. And so really like the main goal was, we can start a channel just with all of these shows that Hanna-Barbera has made.
Cartoon Network.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so he makes the purchase in 91, and Cartoon Network launches in '92.
Okay. So what is being reused then? Is it the old episodes
What I was-
themselves?
yeah,
Are they
I'm really
being cut and
curious.
things like that?
Yeah.
Is it the cells that they used to design Space Ghost that they used to animate to make the shows? What's being reused?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's one of the things I found was sort of a local television network that was covering the show. There's a lot of coverage of the show, I think, because it's so unusual. Like
Sure.
at the time, like there's stuff from the New York Times or the LA Times covering its debut because it's so kind of weird and funky. But one of the editors, Tom Roche, on this like local television network that's like covering the production, like holds up the tape. And he holds up the tape, which is like, here's the show. You know, it didn't last that long. There's like a total of 90 minutes of footage in total.
Of the original Space
Of
Ghost.
the original show. Like, if you were to add up all the minutes, it's like 90 minutes. And he just holds up this tape. It's like, and this is what we build it from. And so it would be the footage. Like,
Right.
all right, we're pulling this image.
Into
some-
some sort of computer system.
Yeah,
So you have to go beyond that. Yeah.
And most of the time it's just, here we have the figures. Sometimes they will have, I don't know, cutaway sequences where you will actually see, oh, they're on an alien planet, but it's not too often. They're
Right.
usually, you know, in this talk show set.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, because I think that's obviously the most immediate way this is, for all of it's for what it's doing. Presumably the original is not a talk show. Presumably, the original is quite but it's like a straight. So that they're using the talk show format as a sort of as a reflexive declaration that what we've done here is transpose this kind of quote unquote straight series, superhero series, however great or whatever, however quality we want to kind of label that. So it's taking those kinds of characters and like flipping their. So within that, is it the same kind of? Is the idea of the personality, or the character? Is it in any way consistent with the original, or are they really trying to, are people as dry as that, because that's sort of an interesting leap to make. You're sort of transforming the type of character they are. So yeah, I'm just really interested in it.
I confess, I think I've only seen I have seen an episode of Dino Boy, like Space Ghost and Dino Boy, but it's been forever. I mean, there's no, I don't know, character continuity. I mean, I'm trying to think. I've even read some of their Hanna-Barbera comics that feature Space Ghost more recently. But it's always like kind of a straight ahead, he's a superhero.
Yeah.
That's it.
And isn't the function of it that it's a kind of comment on, it's significant that it's Space Ghost hosting this TV show rather than, I don't know, Scooby-Doo or Superman or like some other kind of more top tier kind of cartoons. It's this kind of slightly cronky, churned out, quite ill-conceived. Like there's jokes in the episodes you asked us to watch where they're like, sorry, hang on, how can you be both in space and a ghost? Surely, how are you a ghost? Like it's an ill-conceived character from a slightly B-run Hanna-Barbera thing. And therefore, it would make sense that this guy has to become a talk show host in the same way that talk show hosts aren't, Jim Carrey doesn't become a talk show host. Jack Black doesn't become a talk show host. Bridesmaids.
Kristen
Wiig doesn't become a talk show host. It's Jimmy Fallon. That guy. That guy.
No, and definitely one of the episodes, Rehearsal, mentions basically admits we're B tier. I mean, they basically kind of say, oh, well, we're B tier characters because it can't, for example, it can't be Scooby-Doo because Scooby-Doo is a very successful franchise and
yeah, if it was successful, they'd just be making more Space Ghost, right?
Yeah. And there's so many, I don't know, Hanna-Barbera's productions are littered with so many characters that only last a season. And this is one of them. And it is this thing of it's chosen, we can use this one because because it's kind of forgotten. I doubt anyone's seen the original Space Ghost and Dino Boy. In part, because you'd have to go out, it's not exactly super accessible.
Yeah. No, because I suppose where I was leading with all of this was how the fans might feel that this beloved character is now not doing the things that. But
what fans? I don't know.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I don't know. I've never encountered. I'm sure there.
No. That's
like,
I think that's
yeah,
damning enough.
That's exactly
Fans.
exactly. It's the one that there isn't the fandom for that allows it to have this subversive kind of quality, right? Yeah.
And part of it is just it doesn't last that long. So I do think. I don't know. If it lasted longer, maybe it would have more fans. But it is this kind of... It didn't last that long. It's kind of forgotten.
Yeah.
That made it sort of, ripe for this kind of remixing. Because there's like, well, why not have him be a talk show host?
Yeah.
Like, there's no... Like, what's stopping you? There's no kind of pre-built-in...
Yeah. If Jimmy Fallon can do it.
Yeah.
But yeah. You take my point, right? It's the people that become talk show hosts. There's an implication that they've tried something else first.
Yeah, and he's tried acting a number of times.
Yeah.
I suppose I don't know my
Well,
American...
it's just some serious Fallon bashing. But
He doesn't listen. What was it? I guess what I'm trying to... I'm wondering, is there something in... Or what is it about the specificity of the talk? I don't know my American television of the 90s, but...
Well, it was the late night talk show wars. It
Right,
just
right.
happened. Like the Leno versus Letterman.
Oh, yeah.
Like where there's a whole, I guess public debacle of, I forget, it's like Letterman was going to have late night, but then Leno comes in. So that was just very much in the air. And that's why it's like in the first season, they actually, it might be the first episode, or maybe it's like the fourth episode. Space Ghost does interview one of the author who kind of covers that talk show wars.
Yeah, I see.
So that's why, if we're going to remix Space Ghost, why talk show wars? Why a talk show? Because it was so much in the air, especially because the people making the show who weren't like trained animators or anything, they worked at Cartoon Network as like programmers. So we'll get into that. Like, because they work in television, like, this kind of big thing that happened in television is on their mind, basically.
Okay. So it's the perfect backdrop for remixing a character because the idea of a late night talk show and this Letterman versus Leno. Interesting. Yeah.
And a colleague of mine, Dan Brooks, also pointed out to me there are these other shows like the Larry Sanders Show also runs in the 90s, which is also behind the scenes of a late night talk show. Although that's like HBO. Whereas this is
and there's also stuff
in a very
like Max
different
Headroom
medium.
and things like that, the kind of MTV, CGI. Like there's this relationship between animation and celebrity culture that seems to be in vogue in these kind of periods.
I'm thinking of what's it, Celebrity Deathmatch as well.
Yeah, I don't know if that's later.
No, I just like
that.
But that reflexive stuff. It reminds. This is a leap, but I'm going to make it. But like you get the back in Hollywood musicals. You get the backstage musical, which is about the production of a musical. So you get like the straight musicals, and then there's a point where the genre sort of folds in on itself, and
I guess that's what the Muppet Show is. If we really want to jump around all over the place, right? The Muppet Show is a show about them trying to put on the Muppet Show.
Because we see the variety show and then we see the backstage antics of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's using this as a kind of deconstructive force.
Yeah,
we should definitely. We'll talk about that.
I want to delve into the specifics of the show and the trajectory. I have one more question to help us situate this, which is the Cartoon Network-ness of it all, because this is the first original, with using quotation marks, cartoon they commissioned. It would then go on to commission lots and lots of cartoons, and it would move towards original programming at the same time, right? So could you just situate that for us a little bit? Why? Okay, we need to make our first original cartoon. We're going into independent production ourselves. I know, Space Ghost Coast to Coast. So sort of fill that gap in for me.
Yeah, this comes out partially because the programmers of Cartoon Network were frustrated that it was kind of there's the perception it was just a Hanna-Barbera rerun channel.
Right.
And like it's only kind of reruns. And so there was this kind of desire to do something new. But they didn't really have the money to do it though. That was not, certainly when Turner sets up Cartoon Network, that was not the initial aim, right? The initial thing is we have this library of content just to power this channel. But it's through that library of content that actually then gets mobilized to make this new show, right?
Yeah.
This fully original show.
Okay.
Again, I'm doing a lot of air quotes.
We might want to consider doing a video podcast.
Yeah.
I know. So the first episode, Sleeper,
Yeah.
From episode 2, season
Season
2,
two,
episode
yeah.
7, 2.7. And yes, so you picked these 3. So Sleeper, give us a little bit of a snapshot of what Sleeper is.
Yeah. I think I chose it in part because it's just a really good example of, I guess, the bizarre kind of surreal quality, right,
Yes.
of this show. It gives us a bit of like the behind the scenes, like these characters off the clock, quote unquote, like
Yep.
they're kind of in the canteen before they get to work.
Yes.
And then we
That
see,
threw me.
we see them at work, but also how they like aren't very good at their jobs, right? It's the whole thing with Space Ghost Coast to Coast is it's like Space Ghost isn't really a good talk show host. Like
No.
he's not. He can be rude, or there's if a good talk show host kind of guides the guest in and out and helps maintain again kind of the flow of the show. Like Space Ghost Coast to Coast is all about these discontinuities or like surreal moments or like places where the ball is kind of intentionally dropped and all of a sudden like the flow is disrupted, and that's what kind of produces the humor.
Yeah, but at the same time, the way that it's edited together in terms of the shots of the host and then the sort of supporting cast do mirror sort of it reads like a talk show insofar as you often have a Fallon or a Corden or a Letterman making a joke, and then it cuts to like from Kimmel to whoever that guy is.
Like the band leader.
Yeah, the band
It's usually a band leader.
Yeah.
Like
Or
side
sort of roving reporter, or so
yeah.
it's very structured in that way, and I read that as a very interesting, like it's still using the beats of the way talk shows are edited.
And just as for people who are catching up on the show, the sidekicks of the talk show are 2 supervillains plucked from, I'm assuming, Space Ghost lore.
Yeah.
So there's Mantis, which is this like human-sized praying mantis that's functionally the kind of band leader.
Yeah.
And then there's
Zorak,
the other, and Zorak, and who I forgot.
And Zorak and Moltar. And Moltar is the producer.
Oh, Zorak is it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay, fine. And so Zorak's the mantis. Kind of
Yes,
fine.
who's the band leader playing the keys. And
Yes.
then Moltar is the producer who's like watching the monitor.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay, so that structure was sort of, and so I suppose having watched 3 episodes, well, 4 actually, because I watched the table read.
Oh,
just as a sort of, we'll come on to that. Are they very similar insofar as they have it's a 10-minute, 12-minute, 13-minute sort of episode of their talk show as it's sort of unraveling, let's say, or has these discontinuities. And every episode features a celebrity guest. So is that a pretty standard sort of structure?
Yeah, pretty standard. I think there'll be some episodes that can, be off the beaten track of the formula. But usually,
So there's a looseness to the format.
I think there's a looseness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
So with regards to these stars, so we were having this discussion before we started, which was when I started watching. So this first episode is the episode Sleeper is Hulk Hogan and Slash.
Yeah.
90s, baby.
Together at last. And we were trying to work out, or I was trying to work out, and then Alex and I were chatting about this. At first, it felt like, and the guest stars are, incredible, actually, if you look through them. What are they? This is going to sound stupid, but I'll ask it. Are they actually being interviewed? Because when I first watched it, I thought, this is an old interview that they are cutting together to make it look like they're being interviewed by this space ghost. But it seems like they were interviewed in some tell me about this, because I'm confused.
Yeah, well, and this is the benefits of media conglomeration, because they could film the interviews at the CNN headquarters just right down the road in Atlanta.
Okay.
And even like in like a sort of behind the scenes interview, one of the editors is like, yeah, it's great. We can interview anyone so long, like anywhere in the world, because CNN has these headquarters or these locations or these hubs.
So they are real interviews for the program.
Yeah, so
Right.
they are. Yeah, and I think because the editing, like so much of the show is made through editing, they would never ask straight ahead questions. There's no room for a star actually platforming the latest thing they're like producing or that's coming out. There's no, and they would deliberately avoid that. I know in the first like season or so, the questions they would always be asked like, what is your superpower? And then Stars, I don't think Stars really knew how to play along, so I think they dropped that bit. But I mean, I think you'll notice like the actual kind of clips you get from the Stars, like they take the most offhand comments and kind of work around them. Right.
So they use the interview as a jumping off point.
Yeah. So it's not like, what Space Ghost says in the episode was actually said to them. It's often like, well, we have these kind of lines. We're kind of going to write the script around them.
Gotcha.
And make this, kind of, Space Ghost is kind of either treating them terribly or kind of illustrates his own ignorance or all kinds of stuff that shouldn't happen in a normal talk show, but it does happen on this show.
So is it the case that they've got, I don't know, someone from the production staff or the showrunner or actor, whoever it is, kind of doing the interview, riffing with the celebrity, mindful that they need to gather slightly off-cut material, and then they take that footage and then they go, how should we have Space Ghost react to this? Or are they? There's no. I'm guessing there is no relationship between the questions that Space Ghost is asking and the questions that are actually asked of the interviewer. Because sometimes it seems like, well, they certainly know that they're on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, right? This is not being repurposed.
Because they say it. They mention ghosts and stuff.
I think earlier stuff, like the first episode, which has like the Bee Gees, very briefly. Again, talk about star power, but like, I don't think they even understand like
they don't know what
they're
is.
what they're doing. Yeah.
There's a certain Ali G, to use a British reference.
Well, I was thinking Brass Eye as well.
Brass Eye.
Yeah. This kind of. I mean, that's where I felt things got quite really interesting, particularly because there's the Hulk Hogan interview where he's kind of trying to play along.
Yeah.
And
then Slash is like, I'm done. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not. And he even said something like, I knew I wasn't going to like this. So obviously they told him like it's this show where you're interviewed by an animated superhero or whatever, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, where are your eyes?
And he's like, I'm not doing this. And yet they use it anyway, right? So there's this really kind of, but I'm assuming they got access to this talent because of the conglomerate nature of all of this and the fact that, I mean, I don't know, shows that I know a little bit too much about 90s wrestling, but am I right in thinking that Hulk Hogan's at WCW, which is also owned by Ted Turner at that point?
By that point,
So they've got access to this talent because they're all owned by the same company.
Yeah, at least some of them, at least in the case of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, while Slash is trying to promote an album or something, or something like that.
Probably, yeah. We don't even know. Well, I mean, we don't know because like all we see is the kind of discontinuity or like the failure. It's like, actually, this sucks. Yeah. But that's really funny. Right? Like, I guess the resistance.
They're playing along, but actually they're also the butt of the joke, right? So I wonder, were there any instances of like celebrities being angry or refusing to like let their footage be used or anything like that? Or if there were, did they smooth that under the carpet a little bit? In the same way that your examples like Brass Eye and Angie, people did go, this is ridiculous.
But it makes me think of what you said earlier, Jacqueline, about the sort of, they don't have space to advertise them. So I think with Brass Eye, the celebrities, obviously they wanted to platform themselves. On traditional talk shows, they want to talk about a project or that. But obviously in this, there's no space for that. So I think it's, that use of, but I'm interested in whether or not Slash, because obviously he was not enjoying it. But presumably they were allowed to use the footage and there was no kind of pushback from certain folks.
I don't know if anything that like, that footage got pulled from a certain celebrity.
So it wasn't kind of controversial. I think that's it, isn't it? Because I think if you
it feels like there's a potential, like when we're talking about subversion, there's the formal subversion we're talking about, which is all nice and fun and just like, wow, what an interesting idea. But when you get to those moments, it's like there's actually something, there's something quite interestingly at tension here. When surely everything should be nice and cozy because this is all lovely conglomerates getting on. It's not, hey, wink, wink. It's not people going on the Muppet Show. Mm-hmm. Stars, when they went on the Muppet Show, knew the joke. Miss Piggy's going to make you look a bit silly at one point. You're probably going to have to sing a song with some chickens, but you'll also be on the Muppet Show, so playing along is to your advantage. This seems that the stars are a lot more in tension with the format.
Yeah, there are some stars.
And that's part of the pleasure of it. Like we're laughing along with Space Ghost, watching Slash having to be kind of subjected to this madness.
Yeah, like there are some people who do play along. Like I do think Conan O'Brien does
yeah,
play
we'll get to
along,
that.
even though he's also like lambasting, like
Sure. No, yeah,
Space
sure.
Ghost.
That's obviously
But there are some, like Weird Al plays along, and that
Okay.
is a hilarious episode, for example. I think there's a mix. It's sort of like a win-win. It's like either people are discombobulated or don't really get what's going on, and that is what's played for laughter. Or you have people who are kind of playing into it, and that can also be beneficial as well. Like the show does have that kind of flexibility to operate in these multiple ways.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah. No. So I mean, the style of it is like celebrities are being. They are subject to these kinds of editing. You know, that I think that it's interesting that the stars are kind of placed within the crosshairs of what you've put in your article when you talk about kind of remix culture, but specifically the idea of recombinancy.
Yeah.
Kind of Wales's idea of so it seems like stars are part of this. They're being folded into this broader aesthetic of kind of limited animation, but it also makes me think that, or maybe it's worth kind of probing. Is this a continuation of the limited animation that we know from the 50s and 60s, or is it doing something kind of different? Should this be as recognised in terms of these histories of limited animation? It seems like this show is a really interesting example of those kinds of processes of cutting and recutting and remixing. So yeah, limited animation, where does this sit? Because we've talked about limited animation all the time. We love a bit of limited animation. So where does this fit within the lineage? Is this part of that kind of limited aesthetic, or is it kind of pushing it in new directions?
I think it's only possible, like this show's only possible because of the particular techniques of limited animation.
Oh, right, okay.
So the fact that limited animation relies on holds, for example, that makes it very easy for them to kind of roto out that character and do what they need to do with it.
Yeah.
And they're very much employing a lot of the same techniques of limited animation, so movement cycles, and reusing them a lot.
So they rely on. Yeah. So the program relies on it being limited animation, like the original, so that that allows ease of access for them to be able to reanimate and cut the stuff together.
Yeah.
But then the aesthetic that it's spitting out is also. They haven't tried to smooth it out. I think that's what I'm saying.
Like it is still limited animation, and even maybe more limited. Like Tyler Williams at like SAS 2016, I think it was, in Singapore, had talked about Space Ghost a bit, and he was like, maybe it's not just limited, maybe it's like minimal animation.
Right.
And I do think it probably is a really, I guess, a complicated but perhaps a good example of what Chuck Jones, famously derided TV animation as illustrated radio.
Yeah.
Like, and there is, I don't know, there is something to it, although it's still complicated because there is the bits of live action, but the live action is contained within a television frame.
Yeah,
so it's like, what do you do with this? I hadn't even thought of, like, when you introduced this as, well, it's a hybrid live action animation. I was like, well, I guess it is, but I never really think, because like the live action is so contained within a television. Anyway, it's a very this whole discussion maybe kind of illustrates how, I don't know, it's such an unusual production. It's in its release and like who made it and how it operated, it defies so many conventions. Yeah. And that's part of, its charm. But it also makes it a bit difficult to categorize. Yeah. And I think that's what I found really useful about it, in a way, that it was kind of productive, and that it's like, oh, well, actually it is limited animation, but it's remixing it, and like, as precisely because to get back to, I guess, where it fits in limited animation, like it's absolutely a continuation, but a remix continuation, if that makes sense, because now we have these digital editing technologies where actually we don't have animators, we have editors who work with this pre-existing animated footage and are going to reanimate it in a different way and put some new voices on it, and that's how we make something new. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of things. One is it's an interesting way of thinking about limited animation as something that's enabling to these kinds of processes, rather than the way it's often understood, which is you write about it in your article, this sort of there are economic factors, and I think you also talk about kind of television, that television is the perfect kind of place for limited animation, because limited animation is often thought of as this lower budget, churn it out quickly, all that sort of stuff. So I like the idea that that the program relies on limited animation to make its meaning, and also creates this new form of minimal limited animation. And then the other thing was, the kind of digital technology is not being used to smooth out or correct.
Yeah.
It's really pushing these discontinuities that you mentioned, and almost, it seems like it's a really interesting case study to think through limited animation in general, because it's both about the thing and then spitting it out and creating this particular kind of aesthetic. So
this is deconstructionism, though, isn't it? Like, this is what the show seems to be about, is this this desire to pull at the strings, because it's about animation, and it's about how it's reusing the footage, and so it's about a television show called Space Ghost, and how it's reusing that, and the legacy of sort of Hanna-Barbera and all this kind of stuff that the wider network's about. It's also about talk shows, right? And like, having these supervillains play the various sidekicks deconstructs what the absurdity of why these formulas, why is the band leader all like, it asks questions about format and more than that, it seems willfully without an agenda, rather than to deconstruct other agendas. And I'm not saying that as a critique, I'm saying that as kind of a virtue of it. And as we're going to go, there are other episodes that clearly, because it's got that impulse of subversion and deconstruction, when we start trying to think about a formula, you're telling us, well, it doesn't work like that in all the episodes. And clearly, by the time we get to a few series in, they're trying to deconstruct their own, any attempt to kind of have this as being something stable and fixed and things like that. I notice even in this episode, so we're only 2 seasons in, there's this line right at the beginning with Space Ghost where he's like, oh, can't we just start repeating the shows now? Like, it's like getting weary of like making all this stuff. To say that on the original series of a network which is repeating shows all the time, and this idea that repetition establishes things and things like that, I think is all part of the spirit of what you're talking about. Should we?
Yeah, no. Exactly. And one other thing, I'm really interested in what you said about that these weren't animators, that they were kind of editors. So these are, and I think this speaks to a broader industrial. When computers come along, the first, computer animation itself comes from computer science, and so these people working on these programs don't have experience. They're not trained in animation as a craft. They're editors, or they are.
Yeah, like one of the key figures is Mike Lazzo, who starts in the shipping department at Turner. So he works in distribution in a way, right? But then like he eventually is a channel programmer for Cartoon Network. And he and like another channel programmer, work on the show, for example. Like, so they don't have, no one's an animator. They do bring in, I think it's C. Martin Croker, who did some animation and some voice acting work. And again, that is to like, there is a tiny bit of like new animation of like tapping cue cards to have the bare veneer, of, yes, this is a talk show host. But like a lot of these people, I mean, like Lazzo goes on to be like a key kind of producer for Adult Swim, right? Like, so, but it's interesting, like it's through working on the show that he's able to kind of actually get into production, as opposed to just, I'm a channel programmer kind of arranging when are we going to show these shows.
No, it's interesting that obviously the style of it doesn't require all these, like it's not animation. Well, it is animation, but it's also different kind. Different kind. It doesn't require the same. Or maybe the best way to put it is kind of production hierarchies. Its workflows are very, very different because they've got all this material, these kind of archival stuff. But episode 2.
Yeah. So let's jump forward to the next episode you suggested, which was it's the opening of series 4, I believe. Rehearsal, which is different. What we get is a rehearsal of a show rather than the show itself. So tell us why you picked this one. Yeah,
because it's also theoretically, it's like the first show. Like this is a rehearsal of the first show they have.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think that's the gimmick. Because also it doesn't have the like the Sunny Sharrock guitar opening. It's actually like a kind of snazzy,
yes.
like TV talk show opening, where the music isn't kind of blaring and in your face. It's actually like, oh yes, come into the show.
Yeah.
But again, I picked this one because it's, again, kind of doing this meta commentary on the show itself and the talk show format, and then especially the kind of speech at the end where we're actually seeing the set literally being taken apart. And so it's like, oh, so that's how they made this talk show. Oh, it's like it's a model and they were filming it and they had a green screen in the background, and that's actually like the set of the talk show and how they're making it work. So I thought it was really, again, interesting, and again, like kind of revealing that the show's always like pulling back the curtain and actually showing how it's made, or literally commenting like, why is it Space Ghost could be a talk show? Well, something about brand equity, right? Like Moltar literally says.
But obviously that's not how it's made. I think because obviously this is sort of deconstructing an identity it doesn't have. And you get that, there are quote unquote live episodes of The Simpsons, there are live episodes of Family Guy, where they are Cleveland Show, where they pull back.
Well, even the opening gag of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right?
Yeah.
Where they cut. And,
this is not how these things are made, but it doesn't matter.
Right, that there is no actual rehearsal.
But also, there's not. I jotted down. It's deconstructive, and you have this voiceover saying we're still rolling, and let's get the techies in here and all that sort of stuff. Don't worry, it's just a glitch. But then you also have the hand of the art, like the hand comes in, and does, so love a bit of deconstructive. That sort of stuff. But then obviously all the stuff with the green screen, that's not how it's made. But it doesn't matter, or it's, animation often does this, that it likes to play with. So I'm just trying to think of why it does that. Like that's not how the program is made. It's not, doesn't use these mechanisms.
Like there is no live audience, so you don't have to be rehearsing as if you're gonna host.
And I guess it's not live. Like that's it's the least live thing we've talked about on the podcast for quite a while. And we don't talk about live things very often because it's mediated and it's repackaged and it's reused and it's re-edited.
Really, it's like super remediated because you also have
it's like really not live.
Because people are like on the show. Because people are watching television on the show, or the character. We're watching a TV show, but then we have live action on a television set. Sometimes Moltar isn't watching the show. He's watching Chips, which is like this 70s show, which I only know this show exists because of Space Ghost. People are, and I think it illustrates again that interest in television as a form, that the people making this show were TV workers fundamentally, or they work for Turner Broadcasting System. They work in television, and so much of the gags and so much of like the formulas that they either stick to but then also rebuke or kind of undermine are televisual, because that is like what they're into. And what I argue in my article is like what they're kind of self-theorizing as well, that they work in television, so like they can't stop doing this kind of meta commentary on how they actually think television works.
Yeah, okay, so that links back to what I was saying earlier, in that it's as equally interested in the chat show and subverting the chat show as it is in kind of legacies of animation, because actually the chat show is not live, is it? I mean, it is live in the sense that's the illusion, but again, there's this illusion of the chat show that is this Fallon, I don't know why we've picked on Fallon, but Fallon turns up, Stephen Colbert, whoever you like, turns up half an hour before the show, and he goes on, he says something off the top of his head that he's just thought of that day, he hasn't had a team of writers thinking about it and composing a monologue, and then he sits down and has a completely unscripted, uncurated chat with whoever's the guest is. They're having a chat. They're not having a chat. They're not talking. They're not talking to each other in the way that people talk outside of talk shows. It's been pre-agreed what they're going to ask. It's been the anecdote that they're telling is the anecdote that's been pre-agreed with the publicity team. So that desire to kind of deconstruct the liveness, it's not live. I mean, it makes me think of the Cholodenko piece on Roger Rabbit, right? Which is that actually, animation's not live. Nor is the live action equivalent that we might claim to be live, right? So it's it's using animation to kind of make obvious things that are perhaps not so obvious with its live action cousin, but are equally true for those who know the kind of formatting.
Yeah, like the fact that the talk show host scripts, like the cues
Yeah.
are fumbled, or like there's like discontinuity, ruptures in the very kind of like it's barely a conversation sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. Like actually, it's it's not a kind of calm, or what's the word I'm trying to think? I guess the word is, again, flow. Like, it refuses to do televisual flow often.
Yeah.
Basically.
And that it can be quite an abrasive, which is why I kind of teased at the beginning that I was wondering how Chris would get on with this. Is it can be quite an abrasive
Abrasive is a
viewing
good word,
experience, because you just can't settle. It won't let you settle, right?
And there's this great quote I heard, which was sort of like Lazzo wanted it. So if you're channel surfing and you kind of happen upon the channel, and then it's like, whoa, what is this? Like, it kind of, it's so disruptive. It's like, whoa, like, and surprising, and not, it's refusing the kind of cues, or it's refusing flow in some ways.
Yeah, because traditions of deconstructive animation, as well as would say, are deconstructing its identity, or deconstructing the premises of its kind of identity for comic effects, which is slightly different, because obviously the craft of animation, it's through hands and cells and chalk and draw. Whereas it's what you said. The program is using animation, and the general consensus is that we've said this before on the podcast, we sort of know how it's made. Like, there's a loose sense of how animation is produced. It's using that consensus and then mapping it onto talk shows, which we sort of also vaguely have an understanding. And I love that idea that it's a meta commentary, of course, on TV, but it's done by people who don't work in animation. So it makes perfect sense that they're not going to deconstruct the pen and the paper and the easel and the cells and the flipping and the behind the scenes of it. It's self-theorizing on the industry in which they are working. But it's interesting that animation is being used for that. And again, those Family Guy episodes, Simpsons, because we know how animation is produced, it seems animation is often used for those purposes, because we sort of have a rough understanding that it's not done like this, but it's quite amusing when it is. And the episode with David McGowan, where we talked about Mickey Mouse's interviews, and it's cut from the same cloth. It's singing from that sort of hymn sheet where we're like, well, this couldn't happen, but I wonder how an animated talk show might be made. And then it does this. And so I really like the bits where you see the backgrounds being moved and broken up, and the green screen's removed, and you see these sort of set movers walking behind. And so I love that about the episode. Because
I think they're really interested in being like, well, what is television really, or how is it actually is made? And you see this later in like Cartoon Network bumpers, where they're kind of envision these animated characters as workers. A lot of the time, like with Cartoon Fridays, which was their like from 1999 to like 2006 or 2007, there's this cartoon block where, at least for the first couple of years, it's the animated characters hosting this cartoon block. So they're like doing the work of curation and being like, next we'll have this, and then we'll be airing this. So this like the televisual labor of like curation. And again, because like these people are like programmers, so I guess they are, and they're thinking about this idea of curation, and this kind of percolates and bubbles up in the stuff they make.
Yeah, and I think this all comes to head maybe in that last episode.
Let's talk about the last episode,
which is Fire Ant. So this is season 6, but it's preceded by, which wasn't one of the episodes you said, but it's preceded by an episode called Table Read, which is basically the table read, which is a very common, shows do this live. They reveal them on YouTube and stuff like this. So there's the table read episode, which is them doing this episode, which I sort of went back and looked at, and then there is this episode Fire Ant.
Now, did you watch like the full 22?
You told us to. We're like, okay, we're sitting here.
I left it running, and there was just a.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so tell us about Fire Ant.
Yeah. So there's sort of two versions. The original version that aired, which is 22 minutes, and 11 or so minutes are taken up of Space Ghost like crawling and following an ant as they slowly like goes across the screen.
Yeah.
And it just continues, and there's not a lot going on, but it is very funny in the fact that it refuses. Again, I think it refuses to be proper television in a way,
it's slow
right?
cinema. No.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
slow animation. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Disney came up with slow.
So
and
yeah,
slower.
just in case people.
No, that's not.
Half of it is an interview with Conan O'Brien, which we'll probably mention in a minute. The other half is literally him following an ant, and obviously the gag is you're waiting for this to stop, and it refuses to stop, and it goes on for like 11 minutes. It's a bit like. For a modern day example, the thing on Family Guy where Peter keeps clutching his knee and wincing.
And it just doesn't stop.
I thought we were going to go the fight with the chicken.
Oh, and
but that's more kinetic and like The other one is clear. Both of the example, Peter holding his knee in this fire ant. There's a certain element of clearly screwing with the viewers and like. Okay, how far are you literally going to sit here and watch the rest of this episode? Because it's going to be like this, which is really interesting. Yeah. So come on, tell us more about this. Then.
And in subsequent airings of the show, they cut that out, so it is just sort of an 11-minute episode where it will just be like the next day. Okay, he got there. Here's the action. Okay, end episode.
Your son just bit me. Your son is a moron. The
end.
Yeah.
And I think for April Fools, they have played the full episode. But again, there's like broadcasting sort of determining the form, essentially. And again, I picked it because you have a talk show host talking about how Space Ghost is a bad talk show host and like is clearly delineating his failings of like why he's not doing television properly, like he's doing a bad job. And so again, I found this, all of the episodes do this, but especially this one, thinking about, we sort of understand what good television is by its polar opposite. Like the fact that we're being clearly told Space Ghost is a bad host. He's kind of failing to plug, right? He's failing to plug Conan's show. He's failing to actually do the kind of things talk show hosts should be doing. And therefore we as the viewer kind of understand, so this is how they're kind of highlighting for us the scripts that really kind of propel television, talk show hosts or otherwise. Yeah.
And what does the animation bring to this? Because obviously it's an animated talk show, and Conan's treating it like it's like there's no recognition that this is an animated product. He's talking to Space Ghost as this is not what talk show hosts normally say thank you to the guest for, and so it's sort of trying to flatten.
I'm trying to think if anyone mentions that he's animated. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head.
I think isn't it this episode that begins with him being lowered through with the cables?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, so they're not trying to. There's a way of doing it, but then in other scenes he sort of superimposes and like materializes.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, he'll just phase in.
Yeah.
Right. So the whole laboriousness of being lowered, it's like, but he can fly. So why is he right again? Like. But
that's the discontinuity, presumably, of the contradictions, and so the first
and making Conan wait as the guest, like making him wait a minute of this fanfare.
Yeah. Because the second half, so the first half is obviously very reflexive in the way that it's dealing with chat shows, and then the reason I asked about what's being reused is that I felt like the second half of that 11 minutes, it felt like they were almost the original backgrounds from the program from the 60s, and so that because nothing really happens, he's the only thing that moves, and he doesn't really move in terms of his body. It's just it's like they're dragging the cell across the scene. So that's what made me think. I wonder if they're sort of original.
Yeah, I think they are, and again, it's like it's probably just okay. We have this still image, and because the only thing that's moving is him, very because
you can't
very
see
slowly.
You can't see the hand. It's just he crouched.
Yes,
I thought that was funny. I'll give it that. I'll give it that. Yes.
But is it the two things are linked right in their commentary on badness? Sounds like it's just this. Like, so the first half is like this is a really bad talk show, and in a way, the second half is daring the television viewer to go, this is a really bad show. Like this isn't like it's testing your patience. It's testing your. I mean, that's the joke. Like if people are laughing along, they understand that that's the joke. But by the very fact it's not broadcast very often, there's a genuine worry for some people that
Yes.
this is actually just going to make people switch off. Like this is, quote, bad television, and it's daring to be bad. So it sounds like you're playing with some of these ideas.
Yeah. And I think part of the interest in badness is also that they know they didn't have a lot of money. So, making a meal out of its own limitations. Again, like the limitedness of limited animation actually kind of being productive in a weird way.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know like often in
We're literally
sort of
dragging a cell very
yeah.
slowly without it barely moving
Yeah.
across for your entertainment.
Yeah, and I know, there's the classic phrase of like creative limitations, for example, in all kinds of arts. And I think this would be a really good example where I think because the people making it are thinking about their own televisual labor, I think that's adding an extra spin where it's not just, it's bad animation, or it's like, it's very, limited in its form, but it's also like, we're making fun of that he's just literally taking a long time.
Is it also we are basically being required to fill 20 minutes of airtime by repurposing animation footage? So how little can we get away with? Not. I don't mean this cynically. I don't think they're sitting around going, "I can't be bothered today. What can we get with?" That part of the joke is, we've really distilled this down to us dragging an old frame and humming across the thing for 11 minutes, and that constitutes 11 minutes of airtime. But kind of that's what we're always doing, is that we're reusing this stuff, right?
Yeah, possibly. And I do think it's 11 minutes because the show is usually like 11 minutes-ish. Like it's not a full, sort of 30-minute program or full program that would fit in the 30-minute slot. It's only half. Anyway, that's why 11 minutes, not, 5 extra minutes, because that's not going to fit in the program slot. So like the television's distribution format of if we have to chunk everything by 30 minutes with commercials, that means this should be 11 minutes so that we can fit the full 30 minutes with commercials. Anyway, television really structuring some of these jokes, either in form or in content.
We've hit time, but I'm just wondering what the afterlife then is. So it looks like from the World Wide Web that there was spin-offs.
Very
there
90s of you.
The interweb. I was cruising down the virtual highway.
You're on Netscape.
Yes. And yes.
There's a joke for some people who are old enough to understand it.
That's a joke for the people that have still got the free serve CD-ROM to install the web. So what happens that the program ends, and then it seems like as well that the program was a kind of training ground maybe for some people that have gone on to do other stuff. So what's the afterlife? Has there been an afterlife? Do people love it now?
There's a number of things. I do think was like foundational for Adult Swim, and literally, so Adult Swim is famous for its bumpers, right? And this is how they in part like directly communicate via text to their audiences. For example, there's this bumper from the early 2000s. It's preserved in the Paley Media archive, but it's also online, like on YouTube. But that literally narrates the history of Adult Swim, like adults. So the Adult Swim programmers, curators are theorizing what is the origins of this, and it plays, and the first thing it shows is the original Space Ghost and Dino Boy. And then they talk about, so it's started with this, Hanna-Barbera, and then it is Space Ghost Coast to Coast. And then from there, you have these other series. And, by a certain point, by 2001, Adult Swim is its own kind of programming block and associated branding, which is like incredibly popular, like sort of famously in terms of like brand recognition. It scored higher than Amazon Prime Video for like youths 18 to 35 or something like this. Like this was reported like in terms of sort of brand recognition, like it's huge, and everyone wishes they had this kind of wonderful edge. But anyway, it's really interesting. They themselves theorize. It's like, well, how do we understand our own history and like what made us? It's like, well, they don't even just start with Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It's like they show the image of like the original Space Ghost, which is like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The format itself of we're going to remix original footage is used for other Adult Swim shows. C-Lab 2021 is an example. There's some so Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, similarly is remixing an older Hanna-Barbera IP, although that's like original commissioned footage. There's probably one or two others I'm forgetting. There's Cartoon Planet, which was hosted, again, it's like a compilation show, and that was on TBS and Cartoon Network, but hosted by the Space Ghost crew. So there's ways in which the Space Ghost characters get mobilized, even across networks.
Yeah.
And even after the show ends, they still, might pop up occasionally on Adult Swim, doing little bits here and there.
Yeah. Is it written about? It seems like there's not much written about this kind of program, but also, from your knowledge of kind of TV animation, is this something that needs to be talked about more? Are people talking about it? Obviously, we'll hyperlink to your article.
I don't really think it's talked about that much. I mean, to my knowledge, my article is the only one specifically about the show.
Yeah.
Which maybe was one of the things why it's difficult to research at first, or something so a lot of what I ended up relying on were all of the kind of press coverage of how it was made, because I found it interesting. There were so many different articles, whether it was New York Times or more local publications, which was this is so funky and weird. How are they're making this show? And again, they literally had no money. I think the New York Times article from '94 says they had $40,000, or it cost $40,000 episode, which is nothing, right? So they really is maximizing the resources they could within the kind of media conglomerate they operated in to make something, literally kind of cut and paste and kind of collage something together.
Okay, so and for listeners who want to read more about Space Ghost and the kind of wide trajectory you talked about, you've got an article, Chris said at the beginning.
The article I will hyperlink to the article. So this is the article. Every time I move my arm, it costs the Cartoon Network $42. Remixing limited animation in Space Ghost, coast to coast. And then your monograph. Do you want to tease your monograph?
Oh, yeah. It's still, I guess, a work in progress, but it's looking at really Cartoon Network and sort of animation in general under the conglomerate now known as Warner Brothers Discovery, and looking at what happens to animation every time there is this media conglomeration moment. And so I, by and large, use Cartoon Network to kind of trace these shifts, because you kind of need to pick something, go somewhere. But it's interesting. You had Time Warner, and then Turner joins Time Warner, and then you have AOL Time Warner, which was a total debacle. And then AT&T eventually buys Warner Brothers, so we got a phone company coming in, and then that ends. So then we have Discovery, which is a reality channel, basically a conglomerate coming in and then buying, again, Warner Brothers, which is only Cartoon Network. Anyway, so you have all of these different media conglomeration moments, and each time animation evinces or kind of demonstrates the logics of and the corporate strategies that were at play, or sometimes that weren't at play, or they theorize synergy and it never materializes in the case of AOL Time Warner.
Wonderful.
Well, no time pressure on finishing that, but listeners, keep an eye out. Keep an eye out on the ground. Otherwise, Jacqueline, thanks so much for coming on, talking and sharing Space Ghost coast to coast with us, and particularly Chris.
I was astonished. I didn't realize you had never seen it before.
Oh yeah, I've not seen anything.
Wow.
No, it was a brand new experience. I think there's I like things that are reflexive and kind of meta commentaries on stuff and deconstructive and all that sort of business. So and I thought the Fire Ant episode was really amusing because of what it was doing kind of stylistically and this sort of slowness where I was now waiting for it to do what it was going to do. And probably should be more well known.
Sure. Well, look, listeners, check it out if you don't know it. We'll put some links to some of the shows. It's live on YouTube. Obviously, these links are quite temperamental, but it's out there.
It's out there. It's all on archive.org as of this recording. It was on HBO Max, and then when it rebranded to Max, they dropped it. And there was a whole thing, actually. Adult Swim acknowledged the fans who were trying to get it back through, again, a bumper, right?
Yeah.
They communicate through their televisual
What
language.
fans? It's got something.
Oh yeah, it's got some fans. Maybe when they rebrand to HBO Max again this summer,
Yeah,
We might
maybe it'll come back. I don't know.
Great.
But
Let's
yeah.
go. Let's get the campaign going now. Listeners, we are recording this at the Society of Animation Studies conference, which is probably what explains a few echoes and noises. You can find out more at animationstudies.org if you want to find out more about the organisation. And thanks again for their support. You can find us at fantasy-animation.org, where there's an archive of blogs and podcasts for you to check out. You can also find our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's as simple as that, really. Like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. You can follow us on social media at FanAnim Research, FANANIM Research, and you can use that same handle, that's FANANIM Research, at gmail.com to send any comments, feedback, suggestions for future episodes or footnote episodes, or your favourite Space Ghost moments, and that will be delightful to receive as well. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.